The music business has been evolving rapidly, and we talk about those things on the podcast all the time. But with that comes old habits and bad thoughts and practices that need to be left in the past. And so in today's episode, we're going to discuss those things.
You're listening
to the CD Baby
CD Baby
DIY
Musician
Podcast.
Hey there, and welcome to episode number 331 of the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast. And on today's episode, we're going to be discussing 5 things musicians should leave behind in 2023. Yes, there's a lot of new things that have popped up to learn and try, and the industry is always evolving, which means there's probably things we need to leave behind. My name is Kevin Bruner, and joining me is Chris Robley. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I've got a couple gigs this weekend I'm really looking forward to at a ski resort.
Yes.
And the gigs come with free ski lift tickets and hotel. It's, it's a cover gig, so I can't brag all that much, but I'm just excited for the setting, let's say.
Well, you get to go play some hits.
3 hours of hits.
Free skiing.
Yeah.
Free lodging. And
the pay is good too. It's
you get paid. I mean, come on. This is living the life, Chris.
Heck yeah.
So yeah, that sounds cool.
How about you?
Finishing up a lot of recording for various projects, and I'm starting to gear up for the travel season is back for work. Like South by Southwest is coming up. Then the NAMM show is in April. I'll be speaking at that. It's normally in January, but this year it's in April. And then we've got Music Biz, and we've got our big announcement coming up. Maybe the next episode we'll be able to announce our big announcement.
Hush secret thing. That's going to be amazing.
Yes. If you hit me up on Instagram or TikTok, I'll tell you what it is ahead of time. So there you go. There's a little teaser. If you want to find out, you know where to reach me. But anyway, yeah. So lots of things happening, and yeah, it's kind of feeling a little bit more back to the normal spring season.
Yeah. The snow's melting in Maine. Hopefully not entirely, though, since I'm playing at a ski resort. I hope.
Yeah, it's not officially spring yet, but just like the things that are on the horizon are starting to feel a little bit normal rhythms in the music business and all that. I want to remind everyone that if you are listening to this on YouTube, be sure to click the subscribe button and give it a thumbs up. That'd be amazing. And if you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify, also make sure you're subscribed there as well. We did adjust the feed recently, thanks to a listener that pointed it out, that it was only showing 100 episodes. Now on Apple Podcast and Spotify, you can get the entirety of the DIY Musician podcast catalog. So if you want to go back to 2007 and stream all the way from the beginning, and I'm sure that's quite a journey.
if you're really interested in growing your MySpace following, or
we got you covered.
Sales on iTunes, or submitting your music to Pandora Radio,
or hear us discuss whether or not people will care about Google Play,
teaching people the difference between YouTube and the band U2.
Yeah, all that. We could probably fill several volumes of a book based on the information that we've put out there. And a decent amount of it's still relevant. There's some great interviews from back in that day as well, like the Duff McKagan interview from Guns N' Roses, Seth Godin. There was a lot of great interviews.
Episode 2 with Lisa Lapine is still sort of an emotional favorite of mine, because I just think she talked about sort of timeless branding, artist identity stuff. I haven't gone back and listened to it in probably a decade, but it just seemed to get the podcast off on a nice footing too.
Yeah, I think it spoke to the heart of what we're trying to do with the podcast. I think that's what we liked about that episode. And it's good timeless information that's still 100% relevant. So yes, the feed is completely open now, so you can go back and listen to all those episodes. And speaking of following, you can follow CD Baby at CD Baby on all the places. Chris is at Chris Robley, and I'm at K Bruner. And if you want to know what the big announcement is, feel free to message me on Instagram. But by the time this episode's out, we may have announced it anyway. All right. So today we've got our 5 things you need to leave behind in 2023. That's coming up next. Then we've got listener emails and no calls this time, but we got a handful of emails. And then we do have a scam email. So a reminder that you can call our listener line at 360-524-2209 or email us at podcast@cdbabypodcast.com if you've got questions or comments, or if you want to pass along a scam email that you've found recently. So,
hopefully a scam email you've received and not one that you've written. But we'd like to hear from the scammers too if you want to provide.
That's true. If you're like, hey guys, what do you think about the scam email? Do you think artists will fall for it? I'd be like,
someone will fall for it.
Yes, someone always falls for it because they must. Otherwise, I would hope people would find a better way to spend their time. But you never know. All right. So was there any background to why we chose this topic, Chris? And this one could get crazy. This one could get a little fun and energetic and maybe offend some people.
I have background to this. You and I got back from Folk Alliance recently, and let me say the polite, kind caveat to this episode, which is that 90-something% of the artists who attend Folk Alliance are, ambitious. They're up on things. They're willing to adapt. They're great. And then inevitably, there's always a handful of people who are stuck. And you realize why they're stuck is because they're stuck in old habits, old attitudes, old dreams that long since should have died or never existed in the first place, and then I think you and I also encounter this a lot online in comments and a variety of places. There's always artists who are stuck in old habits. And I will also say they're not always older artists. And that always surprises me. I'm like, I'll hear from 19-year-old artists who are like, I won't do this or that's it. I'm like, wait a minute. How did you get infected with this, attitude literally from the 1970s or something that you're still, I don't know. So essentially this episode is a lot of artists are holding themselves back and we want to get rid of these blockers. So I think that's my intro.
Yeah, it's weird when you are at a conference with a lot of artists. We go to Folk Alliance, we have our conference that has a lot of artists, but usually, a lot of the conferences I go, there's a mix of business folks and artists. But when we're at one that's just all artists, and there's a lot of them, we hear things all across the gamut of ideas of what artists should be doing or why people are frustrated.
And what they won't do, what they refuse to do.
Yes. That I think is one thing that I get surprised. It's I want nothing more than a music career, but I will never, ever, ever do all these things that in turn will give me a music career. Well, maybe you really don't want a music career because it does take growth and sacrifice and continual learning because it's always evolving. And so, it's just those conversations. It's at some point I'm just well, if that's how you feel and that's where you're going to draw the line, then I can't help you, then I don't know what you want to hear from me.
And it's almost impossible to talk this sort of person out of these beliefs. So I don't even know why we're doing this episode. It's not like we're going to crack the code and change someone's life. But I should also say, I myself am probably guilty of some of these things. I'm not I don't want to come across all judgy and.
I liked it when you were being judgy.
All right. Well, I'll just judge myself as well then. I can't say I'm the model citizen that we're going to describe.
No, but what it's funny because some people might hear this and go, well, I've kind of thought that at some point. And we're not talking about that type of stance. We have talked, we'll get into this list in just a second, where people have been almost very confrontational about these things. You're okay, man, whatever, just back off. Just back off.
It's only music.
It's only music. No one's gonna die here. All right. So let's just dive into the list, and I'm sure we will have lots of thoughts and things to say.
Yeah. So number one is one thing that holds tons of musicians back is that they want to get signed to a label. And they feel like that's the only thing that's going to give them the validity they're seeking, the validation that's going to make them a band that's, or an artist that's worthy of attention. And there's this waiting game. And it's such a massive distraction for so many reasons that I think we'll discuss now. But I have to just say, like, I am so surprised, given that you and I have been in the independent music industry for so long at this point, and our job is based on giving every artist an on-ramp to the marketplace so that they don't wait around. I'm like, why are people still stuck on this? Why is so many artists don't feel like they're valid until they get signed?
Yeah, I mean, there's legitimate reasons why the validation thing, I think, is a big piece, because it's like you get all these people in your life saying, when are you going to get a real job? When are you still doing that music thing? It's cute. Even at our, Carnage, the Executioner, the hip hop artist that did the opening, what would you call that? It was a concert, but
keynote
it was more
performance,
keynote performance. Yeah.
Pep rally.
Yeah, I thought it might be a pep rally. He even had a whole couple of verses in one of his raps about that very thing, that he's 48 and people still say those things to him, and he's obviously exploding with talent. And yeah, so that seeking validation is, I think, something that we all wrestle with artists, because it's a non-traditional path in life. But that aside, the thing is that it cracks me up when I still hear this, because I remember when we started this podcast, one of the main things that we would get asked all the time at that time, Chris and I were, our job at CD Baby, we would answer the phone and talk to artists all day, where this idea of distribution was brand new. The number one question I was asking or answering back then was like, how do I get signed to a label? And I'd be like, people, it's 2007. Haven't you figured it out? You're not going to get signed to a label. And I'm like, people, it's 2023.
Haven't you figured it out?
This should have died a long time ago. But really, this is not about bagging on labels. But what it is the mindset that I'm going to wait, and these people are going to come select me, and I'm going to be moved from the group of riffraff over here and moved to the selected chosen few, and I'm going to be better than everybody else. That's kind of what the attitude I feel like I run into. And it's just like, that's not how the system works at all anymore. In fact, you will not get a label deal without already having significant business flowing for your music already. That's just the state of the world we're in, where they're just coming and finding things that have already proven out, already have an audience, and that they can, take a little bit further and capitalize it along the way. They're not looking for the diamond in the rough, going to some obscure club in Albuquerque and finding the next big thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's been that way for a really long time. Like, there's not much discovery happening, maybe no discovery in the way that artists are dreaming of. And A&R in labels looks entirely different now than it did 40 years ago or something. But I feel like this dream, or this, sort of, it's like an ambition that has no work ethic behind it. Like, it seems sometimes like it's just a stand-in for laziness. Like, yeah, oh my God, this is hard. It takes a ton of work to create music that's worth listening to. It takes a ton of work to get anyone to notice it. It takes a ton of work to get people to pay for things, like on and on and on. It is a ton of work. Like, yeah, admit it. And if you don't want to do that work, then maybe stop making music, because like the label's not going to come in and do it all for you. Because I also think what happens is, even when artists that are, deserving because they've worked to the point where they get the label's attention and then lucky enough to be signed, what they usually realize is, I'm now working harder than ever because I have to make this label a bunch of money. I no longer just have to have my own overhead covered. Now they're giving me all these assignments and tasks that, like, I don't have time for, so I'm working more than ever. And guess what? They're taking most of the shit that I earn. Like, so, yeah. So, you know, it's like beware of what you wish for in a way.
Well, and also I think there was this era of the industry. Like when we signed our label deal, it was like a 6-album deal. And that sounds good. Like, oh, they're going to keep you for 6 albums. You're going to be, no, that's a bad deal, because that means they can kind of hold your career hostage, because they have the right to 6 albums. And if they don't want to do it, they can make it hard for you to do music other places. But anyway, I was talking to somebody at Universal just last week, and somebody that does a global marketing, and they said that they're signing just a lot of single song deals now. Like that is how little investment. So my point with like that 6 album example is that it feels like an artist, oh, they are investing in me. I'm going to be here. They're going to, you know, like there's all these stories about like, you know, like U2 didn't
long-term development sort of.
Yeah. Bruce Springsteen's one that people mention a lot. Like he didn't really have a breakout until like multiple albums in, and people really believed in him. That's not how it works anymore. If they're signing one song, they're not even really investing in you as an artist. They're just trying to ride the wave of that asset, that musical asset. And
that 15 seconds sure does have a lot of metrics on TikTok. Let's sign that kid.
So the idea that you're going to find this partner, they're going to invest in you and build this grand story with the label, that's probably not going to happen. At least not the way that you have it in your head. So it's just leaving that behind and understanding it's time to get to work and build a business. And when you have leverage, that's when those partnerships and deals tend to make themselves known and bubble up to the surface. And then you have leverage to get a decent deal and use those relationships to advance your career.
And, you know, perhaps this goes without saying, since we're talking about DIY music stuff all the time, but like at that point, the correct answer for your career might be, no thanks, label. I got it covered. I make plenty of money talking directly to my fans and selling them tickets and selling them merch and whatever else. I just don't need you. So
yeah, which is that person mentioned as well from Universal, there's a lot of artists that are at that level, realizing that, you know, I've got my team in place. Why give rights away? I don't need you to get me on Spotify. I probably don't need you to get in a bunch of playlists. I've got a big fan base. So yeah, what are you doing for me?
Yeah.
Which is the best place an artist can be, owning their career, whatever level. All right. Number 2 kind of plays off this.
I love talking about this one. So this one is, you are being held back by the idea that yesterday's music industry somehow magically would have worked better for you. If only you were born in the 40s or the 60s or the 70s or the early 90s or whatever damn period you want to talk about, and everything was better then. Labels would have signed me and developed my career to the point where I just guaranteed to be a star. And once I'm a star, I would earn a real good living from my music, because people had to buy CDs or vinyl or wax cylinders or whatever. Like, as if you, of all the millions of people making music, are guaranteed statistically to have been one of these lucky people like the Beatles or Whitney Houston or whoever. Like, please. So few people ever got to step foot in a recording studio because it cost $1 bazillion. So few people got to ever make a record that then was in stores. So few people ever got their music played on the radio. Like, when you look at how many people made music as a passion, a hobby, whatever. So there was no golden age, please.
Oh, that was awesome, Chris.
Oh,
I hope with each one they get better and better. Like, you know, just like screaming by the 5th one. Some of you listening to this may have witnessed this very moment that I'm about to describe. We were at the DIY Musician Conference in Valencia, Spain. And
now I know what you're going to say.
And I don't even know what the topic was. It was like a panel or something. And somebody from the stage was kind of getting on a soapbox. It was a panel, and getting on a soapbox, basically telling all the artists that they should pull their music from Spotify at the DIY musician conference being put on by CD Baby. And then the conversation was going. I'm sliding down in my seat, going, "Oh my gosh!" And somebody yells, and it was definitely an older person. It was better in the 60s. And then I just thought, what is going on in this room right now at the conference about how you can move your music forward on your own and build a business and make things happen. And
it was better in the 60s if you were Paul McCartney.
It's true.
Or, Otis Redding. Well, maybe not Otis Redding, but he passed away, right? Anyways, if you're like at the top of your game, maybe it was better for you then, but
yeah. So it's one of those things that we encounter a lot, and I'm just like, what would I couldn't see who said that, but I wanted to know from that person, what was it about the 60s that they would have felt would have been giving them more access to recording, giving them more access to getting their music out to the world, giving them more access to build an audience than that they have now. I was just curious.
Well, this probably sounds mean to say, but it comes from that thing inside us that is part delusional that says, well, my music's better than everyone else's. I'm a genius. So clearly what other stars of yesteryear had, I would have had because I'm that good and everyone should love me. But if we're honest, it's like, well, then why, when you play a show, do only 15 people come? Like, there isn't this just sort of inherent shiny brilliance to your stuff, without a lot of work, I guess.
Some people, the world's just not ready for some levels of genius. So,
that's what it is. That's always what it is, right? Once I'm gone, they'll know what they missed.
Hey, it's happened to a lot of artists. So there's always that.
Yeah, well, I think in my rant I said some of these things, but I think artists underestimate how difficult it was to get access to sort of the on-ramps of press, radio, physical manufacturing, distribution, studio time, tour circuits. Like every way that you get music out there back then was so tightly controlled by this, network of gatekeepers who were all, you hear about payola and all this. It's like, it was very unlikely that you were going to get to do the things you get to do now for very cheap or free, which is to reach listeners, record music and reach listeners. And yes, there's problems with how artists get paid now, but at least just as like a human endeavor, we get to make art and share it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It is definitely become extremely accessible, and we've talked about how maybe too accessible at times when AI is just going to make all the tracks for us anyway. But yeah, I was thinking about in our debut album we recorded at Ardent Studios, and for us to go and do the same level of production, if we had paid for it, would have cost about $100,000 at that time. For in some of our recent albums that we've done independently, we've done the same quality of production with the same level of studios and gear and engineers for less than 10 grand. So that's a huge difference. And that doesn't mean that we have to spend that amount. That's just that we've gone to some of those studios again, and things are just cheaper and accessible, and you can do a lot of the time wasting stuff on your own time.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
Yeah. And just if anyone's out there screaming at us, it's not like I think now is some golden age either. I just think it's more like every age has its difficulties, and stop holding yourself back by thinking or by being bitter that you don't live in the past.
Yeah. You can't stop things moving forward as much as you'd like to. So yeah, I think that's a good way to end that one, that it's not about this is better than that. And so just be happy. It's like, you can't change it and you can't go back. So at some point you just need to let go of it and make the best of what you have to work with now. And there's a lot of great tools and opportunities available to you now.
Yeah. Well, now I feel like for number 3, I have to keep the energy amping up, like you said. I'm not sure I'm as fired up about this one as the last one, so I'm sorry.
Okay, well, you can take a little bit of a ride. Roller coasters have ups and downs.
This will be like the ballad in the middle of the set. No, so number 3, one thing that could be holding you back is hiring or waiting to hire a predatory publicist, playlist promoter, radio promoter, someone in the industry who provides a service that promises results and probably under delivers. And when I put predatory in that phrase, I mean to separate the people who are very legitimate publicists and radio or playlist promoters. There are people who do that work well, but I think one of the differences is a good, a reputable version of these services. That person should be first setting realistic expectations and not selling you this dream that, oh, if only I'll get you on these playlists and it's going to change your life. Like your Spotify numbers are going to go crazy. Or like a publicist who promises, to open certain doors. Like every good publicist I've ever worked with has said, you're paying me and I might get you nothing. At the end of this, I'm going to work my butt off, but you could have literally 0 reviews. Like, let's just acknowledge that up front. They don't say it quite that coldly, but it's like, you're thinking about Pitchfork and the New York Times, maybe bring your expectations down a bit because, they acknowledge the kind of a bit of the crapshoot that these games are, and they cost a lot of money. That's the other thing. Like, so anyways, don't blow a bunch of money that you probably don't have in the first place on things that won't change your career.
Yeah. If someone is making in any of these type of roles, if somebody is making big promises, chances are they're not legit, because a legit person is definitely going to want to set you up for proper expectations because they know how tough it is. In fact, the last time we hired a radio promoter was in 2018, and we were talking to 2 different promoters, both that we had known from the industry for years, and they were, very sought after promoters. One of them's like, hey, I can do this for you and I'm happy to do it and try, but I probably can't get you anything. He's like, I don't want to discourage you, but I just want you to have proper expectations about how cutthroat this segment is now, like radio, compared to what it was back in our heyday when we were on radio all the time. He's like, it's not even the same world anymore. They might add 1 track a week, where they were adding a bunch of tracks every week back, in the late 90s. And so he's like, they don't even add all the label tracks. So the chances of me getting you anything is slim. And I'm like, thank you for being honest. Yeah, because that really helped my decision making. I did not pay him, and I thought about it. I'm like, and what I tell artists all the time is like, if that's my promo budget, then he just helped me spend it better elsewhere.
Well, yeah. So I think like if you have a limited promo budget, which I think is probably everyone listening, you don't want to spend it on something that's essentially like gambling in a weird way. It's like none of these things, playlist promotion, radio promotion, or press PR is necessarily going to lead to anything sustainable. Like even if you were lucky enough to get on the radio, what are you going to be played in like 14 cities a couple times a week for like a month?
Yeah.
Guess what? That doesn't like saturate people's imagination. So after that month or that week, you shuffle off the playlist. No one ever hears your music again. And you spent $10,000 or $30,000, whatever, on something that does nothing for you. Same can go if you just get on a bunch of crap playlists, or, you get a lot of blog previews or whatever, blog reviews, but does anyone read music blogs anymore? Like what is that doing for you?
Here's the number one reason I think why every artist should well, most artists should just completely leave this whole category off and leave it behind, is because 9 times out of 10, when I talk to an artist who's bought these services, especially from predatory people, they've thought that I'm going to spend $2,000 hiring this publicist, or $4,000, and I'm going to make $8,000 in return, or I'm going to make my money back. I have heard that. I've heard that about playlist pitching a ton, like, because some of the services that are legit cost a lot of money, like $500 to $1,000 for a campaign. And people are thinking, okay, well, they're going to get me on these giant playlists. I'm going to make $3,000. And so I think part of the predatory aspect of it is that artists are thinking in their minds that I'm going to put $50 in and get $150 out, where it's normally you're putting $50 in and maybe not getting anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, so my experience working with publicists, I would say, has been great. Like, I feel like every publicist I've worked with has done a good job for me. They've delivered really good results. And yet at the same time, and I've always thought it was sort of worth it in a vague, unquantifiable, halo effecty kind of thing. But worth it in terms of a return? Absolutely not. Like, even when I was getting like show previews for tours, it didn't drive people to the shows. It doesn't sell record. Like, there's never been a through line to like profit for me from spending that money. And it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I did it in many cases, but I just, removing that idea that you're going to see a return.
Yeah. And the other thing with some of these services that can be very predatory is that you have to understand that like the press landscape has shifted so dramatically. There's like, I've talked to a music publicist and they're like, there's nobody to pitch it to. It's like, you've got Pitchfork and a couple other websites, but a lot of websites, I mean, people aren't reading music blogs like they used to. So it's, unless you're getting like big followers, I mean, there's big TikTokers that have, like music recommendation content and things like that actually performs really well. That might get you far better reach than hiring a traditional publicist and getting a article in a big newspaper or something,
Yeah.
It's so, but anyway, hiring predatory PR, playlist, radio promotions, all these people, we get hit up with these emails all the time. I know most of you do as well, because you forward them to us for our scam segment. But just thinking about, if anybody's approaching you or you're engaging in a service and their expectations or their promises seem to be out of line with where you really are, then it's probably not a good thing. And leaving that behind, it'll just help you so much, because I think so many artists waste money here. They can damage their accounts. They do things that just set them back. And it's just like, just worry about making great music and connecting with real people. And to me, with this whole segment, is less about scam. It's more about like people doing like, feeling like a used car salesman. Like, I'm going to sell you this pile of crap and make you think it's the best thing ever. And then once I have your money and you're driving off in that beater, there's nothing you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And especially for artists, when you spend money, I know that like spending money promoting an album, you just want everything to add value to the release. And when somebody takes you, it's pretty soul crushing.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to number 4, which is soul crushing too. One thing that could be holding you back is your hatred of social media. And I think since you and I last year recorded an episode called "Is Social Media Dead?" because in some ways our soul was being crushed by it. I think this gets back to, you hate social media so much you refuse to use it in any way, whereas we're asking you to use it in a smart way. So not to say there aren't a whole lot of problems with social, but I'm talking about the type of person who's holier than thou, so pure, so outraged by big tech. I won't give them a cent of my money to. And what these people fail to realize, at the same time as they're complaining that it isn't the 60s anymore, is that social media has replaced all the things they missed from the 60s. It is the new radio. It's the new Rolling Stone. It's the new way of labels and audiences discovering artists. It's everything. It's almost every on-ramp to an audience combined into this one thing. So why are you going to just be like, I'm too good for TikTok, or I'm too good to go live on Instagram or whatever? Like, get over yourself. Like, that's literally how people communicate now. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. Deal with it.
Hey, I think I haven't listened to our Is Social Media Dead episode in a while, but I feel like the heart and soul of the message in that episode was that being on social doesn't mean you're doing anything productive. And in fact, a lot of artists are just doing a lot of time wasting stuff that doesn't get results and effectively makes social media useless for them.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that was the heart and soul of that.
That sounds right to me. That sounds right.
We weren't saying that you shouldn't use social media, but it was more like the idea of that. Are you making the most of your time, or are you just doom scrolling for 2 hours and then saying, I have I'm on social media and nothing's happening? Like, no, you're not doing anything. You're just,
or even if you are doing things for your music, it's more just like by habit, and you're not putting effort into thinking about the quality of the messaging or the content and how it will actually reach audiences and incentivize them to do something for your career. It's like that bad habit of like, oh, I got to post something. It's been a while. So you just slap any old thing online.
Yeah. And that's, it just becomes haphazard and a waste. And so that aside, I talk to people all the time that this is one of those ones where people will kind of get aggressive. And I'll be like, hey, I don't personally care what you do, if you use Instagram or not. Why are you getting all upset at me? I'm not Instagram. I'm not Facebook. So I think the important point is that this is how people communicate now. And so you got to figure out a way to use these tools to your advantage and understand what works with your fans. And yeah, I mean, you don't have to do any of this stuff.
But it's like, to the people who complain about this, they're the same people who want to be famous just because. And then I'm like, wait a minute, you're not going to go where people are, and then you're pissed that no one knows who you are. Like, you have to go where people are, and right now that's social. It feels like someone's telling you, hey, there's like a stadium full of people down the street and there's an open mic going on. You want to sing your song in front of 20,000 people? And you're like, no, I'm going to go in this basement where there's 3 people sleeping on a sofa and play my song there. Like, all right, cool. I hope you like basements.
Yeah. Yes. There's a lot of people that will come up and, especially when a new platform emerges, I think it becomes confusing. Especially, I think where this has popped up more is it also feels like they've all fractured. So, we're talking about going back to the history of the podcast. You will hear us talk about MySpace and nothing else. Then Facebook emerges. You will hear us talk about Facebook and
maybe YouTube and Twitter, but mostly
and Twitter was emerging. Yeah, but it was still like pretty centralized. And then you get to a point where Instagram becomes popular, but then other things pop up. So Instagram's trying to mimic everybody else. Like Snapchat pops up. All these other platforms like Twitch start emerging and gaining popularity. Then TikTok, and it feels like another variation, but I got to learn this new thing again, and it's happening quicker and quicker. And what about all the people I'm leaving at that other platform? Screw it, I'm done with all of it. So I get it. So it's like, what platform to be on? I don't know. There's a whole bunch, but I don't want to be on all of them. But what's going to make the most for my music? So I think that's partly what gets people frustrated. Those questions and the quickness of change to platforms that are very different. So I think that's the other thing. It's like when Twitter and Facebook were brand new, they both were asking you to do the same thing. They were just very different platforms, and the information was presented. It's like, like, what are you what are you feeling today? Or I forget what the prompt was on
Oh,
Facebook.
yeah.
I used to say,
And it would start with
Kevin
your name.
is.
Kevin is. Yeah.
Like,
Wow, I forgot about that.
so they used to work very similarly. So as far as just like the input, but now Facebook is worlds different from TikTok. And so that can be frustrating. But
well, another thing on this is you don't have to jump ship every time. If you've built a huge thing on Facebook and Twitter that's working for you, like you could literally never have adopted any new app past those two and still be using, have a sustainable music career using only those two things that are now 15 years old or something like. So there's no rule that you jump to the newest thing. And sometimes I feel like people are pissed about social because in the past they feel like they maybe used it wrong or not as effectively as they could, or they spent money on ads that they didn't know what they were doing and they wasted money. And so it's like a chip on their shoulder against their own mistakes.
Yeah. Well, that too, but it's a big leap from Facebook to TikTok as far as what you do, how the platform works, where you even find followers and people to follow. It's very different. So I can see it just feeling like a completely different world, and that being frustrating. But I think it all starts with this. You have to understand your audience and your potential fan, where they are, where they hang out online. The tools are available to reach those people. Figure out where it is, whatever platform it is that you're going to get the most critical mass, and participate there. Or you don't have to. I mean, this is
or don't.
Or you don't. But that's the advice. You don't have to be all places. I mean, maybe your fans aren't on TikTok. In fact, my band, we have a TikTok profile. I rarely post anything there because the majority of our fans, like we have a huge following by comparison on Facebook. And I've tried my darndest to move them along, especially like the Instagram. And it's like a large portion of them are over on Facebook. And so I know that I need to prioritize that with our marketing. But that's not going to be the same for everybody. So it's like knowing where your audience is and prioritizing that, and at least understanding the opportunities there. If you still don't want to engage, that's your choice.
Yeah. Well, what brings us to our last number 5. The thing that's holding some artists back is that they're holding their music back literally until the official release date. And we've told this anecdote before, but back in those days when you were on the phone with artists, we would hear from a shocking amount of people who never listened to their own music in their home without headphones on because they were terrified people would steal it. Someone's going to hear it and just recognize the genius.
That plays into one of our listener questions.
Oh, wow. And it was like a kind of like a paranoid version of like Metallica suing people who leaked their record early. Like, come on, like it's not that precious, first of all. But second of all, as we said in the last episode, what's her name? Cassie Petrie has talked about basically encouraging the artists that she works with to treat the official release date like a remix. And to say, what the actual release date is the minute you share anything about this song on TikTok, on Facebook, wherever. And so just not being so possessive and frightened of doing everything perfectly, Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I have to say, I haven't heard it yet because as recording this, the previous episode is not done being edited. But I feel like that episode, the previous episode, is probably one of my favorites that we've done in a while because it really taps into the one of these things that we're talking about, how things have shifted and how music is released and how people consume it differently and how artists are involving fans in the process, even when they just have a chorus. And I have been shocked over the years how many people that I talk to that are like, I'm working on an album. I'm like, oh, when's it coming out? Well, everything's not perfect yet. And it's like, when they go down the list, it's like, you're never going to release that thing. I think part of it is that As artists, one, we will tweak for eternity if we are allowed to. So you got to give yourself some end dates. It's never going to be perfect. That's the whole problem with being an artist. You're never going to be set. You're just going to go. That's why we keep writing new songs. Because so it's never going to be perfect. But also, I feel like when I talk to people like this, that there's something inside them that fears what happens when the project is done. Like that's when the reality sets in of, will people listen to it? It's no longer a future thing. It is now in present.
Yeah.
And the reality set in. I find that, I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about that with several aspects of the music career, with talking to a lot of artists where it feels like you say this is your dream, but I'm concerned that it might only be a dream and you don't want to wake up to the reality of it being real because it changes. A dream is a diversion. It's fun. It's like endless possibilities. In fact, I had one of the videos I made on my own Instagram. I forget what the title of it was. But one of the things I mentioned was that when your dream becomes your job, it can be a hard landing for some artists. I saw people freak out when it was like, everything's happening exactly as you hoped it would. Your dream's coming true. And they just lose their mind because that reality of it being a real job that suddenly you have different feelings about. It's challenging.
Yeah, it's the difference between like a diversion and a routine that has pressure associated with it, because now it's your job. What was I thinking when you were saying that? You were talking about music isn't like, it's not really rare anymore. That reminded me of when sometimes people will share recordings with me, like to get feedback, or even just be like, hey, here, my new song. And they'll send me like a private SoundCloud link and they'll be like, but don't tell anyone. I'm like, dude, don't worry. Like no one's clamoring for an unlisted SoundCloud link. Like calm down. Like when I have to share my music, I got to pay a publicist to get anyone to friggin' listen to it. You're fine.
Yeah, you'd be like, don't worry. I publicly share my links all the time and no one gives a damn. So they're not going to care about some private SoundCloud link that I share.
Yeah. I mean, I've probably said that at some point too. Like, I don't think anymore. Years ago, I was sort of like, secret sound, please don't share it.
Yeah. But going back to the holding the music back until official release, like I do find that I still a large number of artists where I feel like their stumbling block is themselves. This is one of the things that comes up a lot. Like it's some guarded secret what's on their tracks, and they can't release it until it's perfect, or nobody can hear it until it's out because it's going to just have such an impact. And not only is it kind of odd when you talk to somebody that way, but that's thinking that way, but that's just not how the world's working now. It's like, in fact, I've said many times recently that I look at it now, and this goes along with what you said just a few minutes ago, Chris, that distribution is not the starting point. That's the middle point. Chances are you've already built an audience with something, or you are doing things to build an audience, and before you get to the distribution point. But even more so with like what people are doing on TikTok and collaborating differently, it really does feel like the release that goes on Spotify and all the other services is like a remix. Like people have been hearing it before. And go listen to the Brittany Kellogg episode we did about 10 or 15 episodes ago, and that is a perfect example of that in action. And it's all over TikTok and social media these days, those kinds of things.
Yeah. And then even in a kind of an old school mindset of like, oh, I don't want anyone to hear it till the official release. Like, well, one of the big things that got people aware of new records and into stores to buy it on, midnight or the first day or whatever, was the fact that it had been playing on radio for months at that point. So sharing things in advance was an old school tactic and can be still a thing today. So don't be precious. I realize I have a bonus gripe.
All right.
Can I share?
Yes.
I think a sixth thing that holds a lot of artists back is some kind of, I don't know how to define it. It's snobbery mixed with nostalgia and some kind of purist dogma about what is and isn't good music. And like, you all know the person probably from a long time ago that only shopped in the classical section of the music store or the jazz. That was one form of
they had to have their own glass door.
I know, because God forbid Britney Spears or the Rolling Stones waft in from the next room.
How dare you?
But so like that, and I love classical music and I love jazz, but I also love Britney Spears and the Rolling Stones and whatever the modern equivalent of that is now. Like, oh, everyone's griping about Rihanna at the Super Bowl. Oh, your music sucks. I'm like, no, it doesn't. She literally played a medley of songs that were like smash hits. Millions, potentially a billion people love her music. Like, can we please stop with the like, it was auto-tuned. She was lip syncing. Yeah, she was lip syncing because she was 1,000 feet in the air. Like, I'd like to see
I'd be terrified. I could not be laying down holding onto that thing.
Like your lungs would work if you're hyperventilating from being in the sky.
Yeah.
And she's pregnant. Anyways, you know, that person who's like hates auto-tune, hates the fact that everything's digital. You know, no one's saying you can't go and record an analog record in one take. You still can. Plenty of music gets made that way. It's great. But so is like new shit. So I hate the person who just has some, I don't know, like a stopping point past which anything was good. You know, like no music was ever good after 1971 or 2013 or whatever. It's like, guess what? Brilliant music is being made all the time in new ways. You don't have to love it all, but you can sure as hell learn something from it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Sorry, I had to let one last rant go.
No, I'm loving it, but I'm also feeling like a sneeze come on. I'm trying to avoid. I was trying to respond, but I'm like, I might just sneeze all over this microphone. All right, it passed.
I thought of one more complaint I hear. Oh, it's pop music is so simple now. It only has 3 chords, and yes, that's true. And from the standpoint of someone who loves chord changes, I do find that sometimes a tiresome aspect of pop music. But when the song is good, and plenty of songs can be good with repetitive 3-chord changes, isn't it amazing that you can analyze how a song can be good with such simple changes? Like, just flip it around and being like, just because it's simple doesn't mean it's good. But if it's good, it can also be simple. Like, and go listen to Sinatra or XTC or whoever you think of had the best chord changes. That music is still available to hear. Like, you do you.
For some reason, I just pictured a bunch of prog rockers. There's not 5 time changes. There's not, you know.
You'll hear the same person who's complaining about simple chord changes in pop music celebrate the fact that the Beatles' Tomorrow Never Knows was 1 chord the whole time. Like,
yeah, there you go.
Pick a lane.
There was something you said that I was going to comment on. It had to do with there may be only 3 chords in the song in the pop music these days, Chris, but there's 30 writers. So
so it took 10 writers each for one of the chords.
Yeah, that's very carefully selected. We just don't throw chords willy-nilly around like those prog rockers and just try to make it work.
So that's enough. So speaking of, we could just rant on that for a sec. But do you remember when is it Diane Warren?
Yes.
Her whole controversy because she was kind of critiquing that Beyonce's new album had 1 billion writers on it. And
how could it be a song if 29 people wrote on it? You know?
Yeah. And it's weird because now that I've just complained about like old school thinking about what music is and isn't, like, I kind of get her complaint in a way because I personally like to hear songs. I can't even say that that's true. I think I like to perceive that a song comes from an individual's perspective and sensibilities. But if it's a good song that moves me, what does it matter? Like,
yeah,
I mean, we like the Beatles. They wrote in pairings of 2. Like, we liked Carole King and her, whatever. There's plenty of people co-wrote. Who cares if it's 16 people?
Yeah, I think what it comes down to is, I think there's a subset of a group that maybe a lot of us could identify with, where it feels like there's artistry, and then there's manufacturing. And I think that's where the line for some of this is for people, where it feels like that just feels like manufactured music compared to someone's artistic output. And that can happen with pop music. It can feel like, hey, we're just trying to tweak all the exact things, just like junk food. It's like all the right chemicals in there so they're addicted. They come back over and over again. But anyway, I think that's part of it. But then there is people that just, it's like past a certain date, they're just not into what's being made, and the world was better before. And maybe it was.
Maybe it was.
Maybe it was.
Or
But
maybe it's
still,
our brain chemistry imprinting a certain generation of music on our hearts, and anything else just doesn't hit the same way as when we were 16 or whatever.
Hey, nothing will compare to fall of 1991, period. Fight me.
I was going to say summer of 97.
Fall of 91, Metallica's Black Album, Red Hot Chili Peppers album, I forget what it's called.
Did Nevermind come out that year?
Yes, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, and Nevermind, all within 44 days of each other.
That was a good year.
Yes. And all those albums rode the radio charts for the entire year. So that was like my whole senior year of high school. It was just on rock radio. You heard all those albums over and over again. And there was other great music that came out that year too, but it was just like these landmark albums that are still talked about today, that all came out right next to each other.
I remember being on I think it was junior high school field trip, and I had a Discman. Remember those?
Oh yeah.
The Discman with all of those albums you just mentioned. It was an amazing trip. I was probably very antisocial on the bus. I was just listening to music, but
see, Chris, it was better back in that day. All right. If you have some thoughts or comments or some things that musicians should leave behind, or if you're mad at Chris for everything he said in this episode, you can call our listener line at 360-524-2209 or email us at podcast@cdbabypodcast.com. And we've got some emails. We need to jump into it because I've got a meeting coming up in a few minutes.
Right.
So these are all relatively quick. My name is Hans. I play guitar in the Swedish krautrock band Kungen Mas. Apparently that translates the King's Men. I'm sure I totally butchered the Swedish name. Thanks for a great podcast. I think I've listened to almost all the episodes. A quick and maybe basic question. I've heard Chris mention a couple of times on the podcast when he has recorded a new album in the studio that he always asks for an instrumental version of the songs to use for placement in movies or TV shows and the like. That seems to imply that the mixer is the same person who recorded the session and that mixing takes place as a part of the session. Is that the default way to do things? On a few occasions I've been in the studio to record, we have always handed over the tracks for someone else to do the mixing, and mixing has tended to take weeks or months rather than being done at the same day as the recording. Just curious how other people handle this process. All the best, Hans.
Hey, Hans, I think maybe when I'm saying studio, I mean basically like the studio where the mixing engineer is, which sometimes is the same studio, but sometimes it is a different person. Basically, I mean, before you finish your mixes, or even if you're working remotely, just tell the person before they close the session to burn the instrumental mixes.
Yeah, and when it comes to instrumental mixes, sometimes you will encounter an engineer, because I've had this happen, where they're like, oh, you want an instrumental mix? Well, now I'm going to rework it because it's going to sound funny if I just mute the vocal. I'm like, no, I literally just want you to mute the vocal and bounce it again. Because for sync, it's really just so that you can pop in the vocal if needed, or remove it, have a version that has it removed if needed. But sometimes the engineer will feel like they need to go do this whole blending to make it sound better instrumental, and really you just want it to be muted, mute the vocal. And most people, not always, but most people will have someone else mix than engineered. I don't know. Do you do that, Chris? Do you normally have someone else mix that different than engineered?
I have done that a few times, but actually I think a lot of times I end up using the same mixing engineer as the recording engineer.
Yeah. Actually, I was thinking of
or I
mastering.
send the unfortunate mixing engineer crap I've recorded myself.
Yeah. So yeah, and when they're whoever's doing the mix, whenever that is, have them just mute it, and because it's a pain in the butt. You won't recover the same settings that they have and all the plugins and all that later on, and it'll take a lot of time. So just have them do that. All right, next question. My band lives in different parts, and we wanted to collaborate online. Do you know of any tools to combat lagging when playing simultaneously, or good online spaces to mix our parts together while we record them apart? Also, I thought it'd be fun and fan-friendly to share our half-written pieces with each other over live stream, but one of our members is worried our songs could be stolen because nothing is protected. Is he right? If his concerns are exaggerated, how can I set his mind at ease? Thanks for a great podcast, Simon.
Play him this episode.
No. Oh, maybe play him this episode. You see that I could get real snarky. I'm like, is that a real problem we see? People stealing other people's half-finished songs? I've not encountered this problem.
What? If I could just interrupt for a sec, I watched. Have you heard of the show Poker Face?
Yes, I've been watching it.
Did you get to the rock episode?
Yes,
the heavy metal band. I don't want to give it away.
I know. I wanted to talk about it, but it's hard to talk about with people because it gives away the premise.
Yeah.
I thought it was so funny. I was laughing so hard.
Let's just say that there are people out there apparently who are desperate for a song.
That's true. That's true. So anyway, no, you don't need to worry about someone stealing your half-written song. In fact, I've never even heard of this ever happening. And with things like AI, why would someone steal a half-written song when they could go make one in 30 seconds with a machine and feel like they own it outright?
Also, was it that there was the context of it being live streamed? They were afraid to share it as a live stream. Is that?
Yeah.
Because the other thing is, like, I don't know what holds up in court, but yeah, like the live stream itself is a time-stamped documentation of the thing existing.
Yeah. Once you have your song in some sort of tangible form, whether it's a chord chart with lyrics and melody or a recording of it, you have copyright protection. You just don't get the full weight of the law without it being registered. So as far as the other question of how to play over line, there are some tools emerging. There was a company, I forget the name, that I saw. I wanted to see their demo at the NAMM show last year, where they allow bands to perform together over the internet with zero latency.
What?
And there was several tools popping up that were being talked about at the NAMM show last year with that. I haven't heard much about it since then, but the distance matters. Like, I was like, oh, great, my band's in Georgia and I'm in Oregon. And like, well, that's too far. You're still gonna have latency. Because
light can only travel so fast.
It's true. We need to get on that. Yes, because of that. And so like 500 miles was like the limit at that point. So there are tools. You might check that out. I don't know if they're commercially available yet, because a lot of these were still sort of like in tweaking mode and demo mode. And as far as putting your guitar player's mind at ease, I think it was the guitar player. Just bet him $1,000 that no one's going to steal the song. If somebody steals the song, I will give you $1,000. Make it $1 million, because I know it's not going to happen. Our biggest problem is no one's going to care. That's our problem. Not that they're going to steal it and run away with it. That's what I would say.
That's not legal or financial advice,
no.
But it is life advice.
All right. Our last email from Malia. Dear Kevin and Chris, I'm getting ready to release a single, and it's a cover song. I'm using Easy Song to license the song, but I really don't understand what I'm buying and what I'm doing. What are mechanical licenses am I buying for each stream and download? If I ever make CDs, will I need to buy more licenses? So thanks for the email, Malia. So yes, well, she included a screenshot of Easy Song Licensing's dashboard. And so you have the option of selecting what is this for. You will notice that streams are not on there because the DSPs now are paying publishing mechanicals directly. So you don't have to pay for those. So you would, the way I estimate it, if you're not doing CDs, just estimate how many downloads you think you'll sell and buy that. You can start low and then go back and pay more when you surpass that number. And yes, CDs are different. So if you make CDs, you would have to license each track individually for the CD, which is different than licensing each track for downloads. And it is per individual cover song, so not per release.
And technically, if you're giving away downloads or you're selling them on Bandcamp or what, that counts as,
yes,
even if you give away a download on your own website, that technically counts as something that a mechanical royalty is owed for.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So yeah, that's what you need to do. And hopefully that's helpful. And Easy Song is a great place to get it done. It's easy.
Yeah,
it says it in the name.
What's easy? Song licensing.
All right. We have just a quick minute for this scam email. So this one, I think, goes along with this episode as well. I'll just read their email. This is the email that they sent me. The artist sent me, and then the scam email. The scam email is very quick. Dear Kevin and Chris, I'm Evan of Music at the Blissful, a children and family music artist with a new album coming out February 9th with the help of CD Baby. Oh, hope the release went well. Your podcast has been a fantastic source of education, guidance, and entertainment. Normally, I do not get these types of scam emails, but as soon as I did, I wanted to share it with you. The worst part about the email is that the from part comes from Spotify, but as soon as you look closer, you see that it's not a Spotify email address. Furthermore, I'm a children and family artist, so other than Raffi and Laura Berkner, most successful artists in my niche are not getting 73K to 98K monthly listeners. Personally, I'd be over the moon excited at Music at the Blissful to have 10,000 monthly listeners to their artist that he repeated again. It's kind of typo. Anyway, I hope you can have a laugh at this email and continue to educate other DIY musicians. Thank you, Evan of Music at the Blissful. All right, so this email is one that I've seen a couple times. It's like it says a curator has picked you for their playlist, and it does look like, if you glance at it quickly, like it's coming from Spotify, and it kind of mimics some of Spotify's design aesthetic, although it never says Spotify. The following curator has booked you for their new playlist, Onyx Hits, with a reach of 73K to 98K monthly listeners. And it's pretty clear that it's a different company, but it's like, this is one of those things that's predatory. I don't know if it's like just all out fraud but it feels very predatory and misleading intentionally in order to get artists to click thinking that Spotify picked them for a playlist. So yes, those have been going around lately. It's probably not really Spotify.
I feel like I've been getting in the past like month, way more of scam emails like that one than I used to, or maybe I'm just noticing them more. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe so. They're probably a little cyclical as well. I mean, I don't know. It's weird because I've been getting that one a lot, and like maybe it was around Christmas I was getting that one a lot, and then I haven't been getting it lately. But it seems like, I don't know, maybe they just wear they have a list and they wear it out and they're like, nah, screw this. Let's move on to another list. And they're taking a break on the list I'm on for some reason.
Oh, jeez.
So anyway, all right. Well, if you have a question or comment or want to share a scam email, you can do so You can email us at podcast@cdbabypodcast.com, or if you'd like to call our listener line, you can do that at 360-524-2209. And yeah, leave your thoughts, comments, weigh in on a topic, whatever, and you might just end up on the podcast.
And let's see. We'll be we've got 2 more. As of this, we've got 2 in the can. This one. Yeah. We'll be on our usual track.
Yeah.
We'll be back next week with something good.
Yes, of course. Of course. All right. Well, I need to bounce to a meeting. We'll catch you next time. See ya.
See ya.